part of it is when my exposure to the Johnson Center coming over as the interim director of the Community Research Institute, I really got to see what was happening here and was extremely impressed with what was happening here. And as I got deeper into it, I realized how the work of the center is so aligned with social work and the values of social work, and even sharing the same origins and friendly visitors and a lot of history of social work. And so, it seemed like a really natural fit. And then as I got to meet people and understand what they were trying to accomplish and the methods and the techniques and the partnerships that were established, I just became extremely impressed and wanted to be a part of it. I had always leaned towards teaching macro practice social work, social policy, advocacy, those kinds of courses. And so philanthropy and the Johnson Center it was a nice fit for me, a very nice fit. What the Johnson Center does. So the Johnson Center is now 20 years old, and I'm sure you have already have some information about some of the history of it, but what I like to recall when I talk to people about the Johnson Center is that, and why it's at Grand Valley, is that we were the only university in the state to really step up and not only say we wanted to have this center and submit a proposal, but also put up matching money to support the center. And so I think that put this center this school, this university, in a unique position, one that I think many people probably never thought that Grand Valley State University would be in, to be a leader in the state and nationally as a philanthropy center. The services here are infrastructure services for the sector. We support nonprofits, we support foundations, and we support communities by providing information, research, training, professional development. Our tagline is transforming communities. And so that's what we want to do, and we want to assist people doing good work out there. And so in a nutshell, that's kind of what we do. We have several strategies that we use, like a grant-making school, which is a national training program for grant makers around the country, is a strategy. Our nonprofit services provides workshops and trainings more in West Michigan and across the state of Michigan for nonprofits. And our Community Research Institute, which is more of a West Michigan-based research institute that provides online data systems, support, program evaluation, secondary data analysis, embedded community-based research, participatory research. So we're hand in hand with the community trying to make change. Well, I think the idea behind having the academy involved in this preparation is because there's a lack of formal education around philanthropy and even in nonprofit sector. It's still a growing field, and more universities are jumping on board as they see the need. But we need a baseline for professionals. We need standards. We need ethics. We need to have some baseline for the profession. And so I think the academy has a unique role to play in providing that. Going forward, there also are professionals in the field that are beyond their time of being in the academy, and they still need that professional development and training. And that's where our centers like ours come into play, where we can support those professionals. We can continue to bring them the latest knowledge and the latest techniques and the latest thought leadership about the sector. And so I think going forward, universities have a growing role to play in the sector. Grand Valley's program continues to grow. I'm very pleased to say it continues to grow, and we're hopeful that we'll roll out some new programs in the upcoming years that will increasingly target the sector and provide additional opportunities for advanced degrees. The development really goes back to the start of what we call our Community Research Institute, and that was a partnership with Grand Rapids Community Foundation and Grand Valley State University to develop this CRI, as we call it. And the concept was that grant makers and community members need information in order to make good decisions, so data-driven decisions. And so the vehicles for doing that are research, evaluation, but then also making data available to the community, democratizing data. And so CRI has kind of specialized in democratizing data through online data systems where anyone in a community can go online, put in their address, and pull up profiles of their community. Generally census information, but when we have more information, we also put that up. So for instance, in West Michigan, you can get local police information, you can get school information, you can get a variety of information that may not be available across the country, but it's something that communities use, neighborhood associations use to figure out their next strategy for improving their neighborhoods. Foundations use that information as well as nonprofits. One of the pieces of data that we provided was around the Hope Zones, what's called Hope Zones in Grand Rapids. And there are a number of place-based strategies now that are operating in these Hope Zones. And the idea of the Hope Zones were that we had a question of what are the 4 most impoverished or in need neighborhoods in the community. And we were able to go into our system, map those neighborhoods, draw some boundaries that made sense around using elementary schools as catchment areas. And we came up with Hope Zones, 4 Hope Zones. And out of that, a number of foundations and other nonprofits have begun work trying to use this place-based strategy concept to improve conditions in those Hope Zones. Part of the answer to your question is about this sense of collaboration, the sense of we're in it together. And I worry about whether that will continue because I do think there are elements of it that are counter to our society right now because we have this me thing going on in society, very individualistic, and you see this kind of swing back to that. And I think Michigan is unique in that we've had this we, and it's all of us. And we don't do well unless we're all doing well. And so that's the sense that my peers in the state are working from. They're working from that framework of it's us, we're in it together. And so when we talk collaboration in a room, there's usually no one blinks at it. It's really how do we do this? How do we get it done? And so it's a real pleasure to work in a community and in a state that has that attitude.
Were you surprised by that?
I was surprised by that. Coming from actually the last 2 stops in formal academia, in departments where faculty can be competitive, and then in the mental health arena as well, in the human services, where there is increasingly competition between nonprofits for smaller and smaller dollars. And so coming into this position here at the Johnson Center and to see the level of collaboration with entities that could do things themselves. I mean, they really could go their own way and probably be fine for a long period of time, but have made the decision not to do that, and that we're stronger by working together. Underpinning all this collaboration are good relationships. And some are always better than others, but I think everyone works hard to get along. Lunches are a big part of that, phone calls and having coffee together to sort through problems, and that willingness to dialogue, that willingness to call each other up and say, hey, I really didn't appreciate you doing this. Is there a way we can work around it or rethink this? Or that spirit is really important to keeping this going and keeping that collaboration in place.
Okay.
First thing I tell them is actually go talk to a lot of people. And I give them a list of names, and I like them to go sit down and I say, I know you don't have a lot of money, but go buy people cups of coffee, and most people won't refuse a cup of coffee to sit down and talk with you, and have that dialogue and get the lay of the land and understand what's going on in the community, and to not think in a silo, to think more broadly about the problems that we're dealing with and the relationships and how we go about our business. So I just think that that's extremely important. The other thing I tell them is to make sure you do what you say you're going to do. And as long as they do that, they'll be fine. Yes, definitely, helping them figure out, if it's students, what courses to take, or if it's professionals in the field, what kind of continuing education courses, workshops, various things they can come to. I encourage people to come to our brown bags all the time, every month, because they're free. And so it's a great opportunity to not only get information during the workshops, but to network with other professionals. So internships are another way for students to get exposure, volunteering at organizations. This community really has, and when I say this community, I mean Michigan's community, really has a lot of open doors for people, and will welcome people in. And so There's a lot of different ways to do it, but everybody has to kind of find their own comfort zone. But I definitely try to get them out there in addition to the formal courses. It's hard to quantify, but I do believe that that's true. And I think there's several ways that I see that playing out. And one is by the richness of opportunities to help others in the communities. That every community in Michigan seems to have something going on where they're helping people who need help. And that's a clear example. And it's often faith-based or has some connections to faith-based organizations. And so I think that does happen in one way. I also see on the other side is that professionals working in fields that have talent and could work in different areas and make a lot more money and probably have, a different lifestyle, but they've made the choice that this is important. And it's important for who they are and their well-being and their values. And so they made the decision to consciously serve others. Working with people and the knowledge they bring.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I think for that it is just being around the table with people who are giving of their time to be around the table and give their input into whatever it may be, whether it's a leadership council, an advisory group, or boards. To me, that's a tremendous opportunity for people to give of their time and their knowledge, and that human capital is extremely important to the sector. Change in direction. Oh, so one of the recent projects we did was with the Great Start Collaborative. And there were over 50 organizations represented in this collaborative and funders, and we had everybody around the table a couple of times to decide on community indicators, what's important to them about early childhood education. And we spent about 3 months in process, came up with a list of indicators. We were able to take those back, map those indicators, and create a report for the community to show geographically areas of need for early childhood services or where families were struggling throughout the entire county. And we were able to map that, pinpoint that. We were able to see children who were linguistically isolated, children that were in extreme poverty, that didn't have access to early childhood education. And it really was and it was designed to be a baseline report, but it made the whole committee begin to think about their roles in serving these children and families. And it's funny because I still go to meetings a year later and people are pulling out the report and referencing pieces of the report and saying, well, but this report says this, so we should be looking in this neighborhood, or we should be looking at starting a center here. And so it's really gratifying to see people actually come together, make decisions, and then actually start to make change after that.
Or did that?
Yeah, well, no, it actually didn't happen. I heard it happened years before, though. So this is, I think, and I do. It has been a progression because when I talked to people who had been at the table 10 years ago, they said we never have gotten here. We've tried this many times. We've never gotten this far, and we actually got a product now. No one left the table. So I think it's a learning process for communities. I think it's building relationships, understanding that it may not be perfect. And just because it's not perfect doesn't mean we don't do it. And so it's that kind of understanding. It's also understanding that everybody's committing their time. Nobody has to be here at this meeting. This is an addition to their jobs. And so the fact that everybody was there, common understanding. From our perspective, they actually know that we weren't getting paid a lot to do this work, actually. So I mean, it really was a joint effort. Everybody was committed to it, and it worked out really well, and it's still going. It's really interesting because we don't do the public policy work, but after the 2010 census came out, we actually wanted to give the community a brief about what the community looks like demographically. And so we put together this demographic brief of the county, and we highlighted one of the interesting things is that almost 50% of the ethnic minority population in this county don't live in the city, which was news for people because, if you listen to the media or just anecdotally, you think most ethnic minorities are living in the city, and that was not true. They actually were living in the surrounding suburbs, at least half. Well, I happened to be in Lansing for a conference, and I was in a presentation talking about redistricting, and they showed a redistrict map that was being proposed by the legislator, and it looked, like a traditional map, and it didn't highlight some of the things that we highlighted in our map. Well, I saw that same map about a month later, and it looked just like our map. And they had redistrict lines according to, they must have used our data to draw lines around voting districts. So unintended consequence of that. So we entered the political arena without knowing, and I'm not sure how the map it was publicly released, so anybody could have picked it up and actually saw those demographic changes, and magically the county map was redrawn.
It's a funny story.
Yeah.
Sad, but
It is sad but funny, yes. Information around about the sector. We're researching diversity in the sector. We're researching information about compensation and benefits, and our partner organizations distribute that information to their members, and they use it as a platform to talk about policy and policy changes. And so we have this kind of partnership where we provide some of that data to get the ball rolling, and then other organizations, our partner organizations, take it to actually make the change with the legislators. So I think the intent of creating these academic centers was to have them to be thought leaders, and I think that is occurring. I think right now the focus has been on actually getting people in the field who have this professional education under them, and I think a lot of centers are focusing on that. There are a few centers that actually are focusing still on the infrastructure and supporting the organizations that are doing the work currently, and we're one of those organizations that are focused on that right now, although we try to do both. So we fit into the national picture as one of the largest, actually, philanthropic academic centers in the country, but also are focused on our grant-making school, our focus on our foundation review, which is all about disseminating information to the professional communities. And so that's really been our niche at the national level. We're also members of the Nonprofit Academic Council. And we are active players in our NOVA and some of the other national organizations that are out there, in addition to our role in COF and independent sector and all the other kinds of national groups that we are a part of and try to be a player in. It's important for that work. It's important for people to learn from our experiences, and for us to learn from their experiences. And so this transfer of information back and forth is extremely important to the sector. Yeah, it's interesting because I get a couple of responses when I talk about being from Michigan, and so one is, "Oh, you guys are great, you have this figured out," and the other is, "Oh, not Michigan again." Another one from Michigan. So I think, even in those kind of begrudging comments, people are acknowledging Michigan as a leader in the sector, and not just in the amount of programs and the quality of programs, but I think actually genuinely trying to contribute to the national dialogue and make things better across the country. Not that we're just focused on Michigan, and that's what I hear. So when I hear people talking about Kyle Caldwell or Rob Collier or Dottie Johnson or Kathy Agar, I mean that's the spirit that they're talking about. That these are people who worked in Michigan but were concerned about the sector. I think the one practical thing would be to, it's kind of an old adage of respecting your elders. So realizing that people who've come before you and taking the time to get to know them and hear their stories, and then learn what you can from those stories. So I think that's always the first step in taking on this kind of initiative. I think understanding that these are learning positions. And so you never know enough. You have to constantly be learning, and that takes a lot of different forms now, from Twitter to Facebook to everything, every online news publication that's out there for the sector. But you have to constantly learn, I think the spirit of collaboration is a very concrete approach. If you're trying to build silos or build, your own kingdom or queendom, whatever it may be, it's not going to work in Michigan. And
You're from here, right?
my path, yes, from Grand Rapids. I have two parents that are educators. They actually didn't have degrees when I was younger, but they actually worked, and through the generosity of employers and scholarships, were able to get their education as we were growing up. So I spent most of my time growing up with my brothers and my sister, and my parents were off in class. But I saw what they were doing and valued education, and they instilled the value of education in us. I got to see what philanthropy was doing for them in terms of scholarships and fellowships and allowing them to advance. They both became very good teachers in public school systems, and my dad was a principal as well for a period of time. And so those were just excellent role models of the value of education and how you move forward. They also instilled this motto of giving back, and that you're part of the community, and being a part of volunteer organizations, whether they're fraternities or athletic organizations, but being a part of something bigger than yourself. And so that I grew up with that kind of spirit, and so it really probably hit me in I think it was like my sophomore year in college at Aquinas College, and I had to do a volunteer experience, and I went to a local mission and worked in the kitchen serving food, and it was a great experience. I was a little intimidated at first and got there, and then I got comfortable, and so after my internship was done, I actually came back another week, and part of the reason why I came back another week, because there was a gentleman there that I didn't realize at the time, but actually had schizophrenia. And he kind of befriended me in the line, and he would joke with me. And the last week I was there in my internship, he asked me, do you know how to play chess? And I said, no, I don't know how to play chess. And he said, I'll teach you. And so when I came back that additional week, I actually spent time with him learning how to play chess, and he actually taught me how to play chess. And it was just the most amazing experience that he was not real focused on most of the time, but whenever it came back to the chessboard and our next move, or he had to show me a move, it was a clear statement of what I needed to do, and he would show me, well, if you do this, then I'll do this, and so you need to learn not to do this. And he was teaching me all these different moves in chess, and I actually became a pretty good chess player because I learned there. So went away and came back, and then I finished my degree at Aquinas College, played sports there. And
In social work?
no, actually in sociology and psychology. So I already knew I wanted to go in this direction, and then in my senior year in college, I started working part-time at Bethany Christian Services and working with youth that had been abused and neglected, and then sexual offenders, teen sexual offenders, and that was a wonderful experience. And again, it gave me that servant mentality to say, this is really important work to do, that these young people do need role models, they need people to talk to, they need people who are in their lives in a positive way. And so I've continued that, worked for Bethany for about 5-6 years, and then I did a stint as a probation officer for habitual offenders in the juvenile court, and began to realize that some of these youth really needed mental health counseling. And so I was kind of vocal in our board meetings, probably a little too vocal, because one of these representatives of the mental health organization said, you really have a problem with what we're doing, so why don't you come work for us? And so she recruited me to come work for them. So I was the first juvenile court liaison, and it was a joint funding effort between the mental health system and the juvenile court, and working to make sure that youth had access to the services in the community. And then as that grant kind of went away, I actually got absorbed into the mental health system. Worked as a contract manager, did an internship as a mental health clinician, and then actually liked some of the direct work I was doing at that time, and was promoted, and then eventually became the program director of the Access Center for the county for mental health and substance use services. I guess as I look back, I'm probably a little bit of a complainer, because I complained about the students we had as I was the director of the Access Center, and I kept complaining to some of my friends who were faculty here at Grand Valley State University, and eventually they called me and they said, "Well, why don't you come teach?" So you can help do something about these students that you say aren't getting the kind of preparation that they need.
So this is a career strategy.
Career strategy. I complain and get another job. So one day they called me, and a position was open to be the director of field education here at the university, and I took that job with the understanding that I would finish my doctorate at Michigan State University, and so I did that, and for about 6 years, and then I was recruited by someone to come over to the Johnson Center as the interim research director. So, 2 beautiful little girls.
And a spouse.
And a spouse, yes, and a wife, Kendra.
Yeah, and
Right now, I have an 11-year-old that says she's going to be a gazillionaire, and that's her line when you ask her. And I don't know where she got it. I think it's probably from her uncle, but she wants to be a gazillionaire. And so we've been having conversations about what that means and the responsibility that comes with being a gazillionaire, to make sure that others don't go without. And she's taken that to heart, and she really, talks now about, well, yeah, when I'm a gazillionaire, I'm going to have a foundation. So, so I'm already working on her. So. She's a future donor. And my youngest, she's kind of just floating around out there having fun right now. But they all have, the little banks in the room that are spend, save, and give. And we, pretty sticklers about, when they get money, that something goes in each of those pots, and that we figure out what to do to get with the give at some point. So they're getting the philanthropic spirit and the spirit of generosity. I think for the future, I think people need to realize, and maybe I'm too cynical and maybe a little too political, but I think we're at a crossroads, and I do think that we need to make sure that the message of philanthropy gets to the next generation, and that people understand the various ways they can contribute to something greater than themselves. I worry about that getting lost, and getting lost in some of the technology and some of the other things which I really embrace, but I think we need to use it with a purpose, and so that's one of the things that I worry about, is that we have so many families living in poverty day to day and don't have time to give messages to their kids. And so I worry that we lose that message. And so I'm really grateful for this project, because I think this project helps keep that message alive and teaches people about philanthropy, and hopefully makes us all better.